there was a tiny village surrounded by mountains and hills. The village was called Elawani, and there lived a princess named Zoe. Her father was King Austin, and she was his only daughter. Now, Zoe was known for her beauty and cheerful spirit, but she had a significant challenge. She was crippled, and because of this, no man wished to marry her. Her life became even more tragic when her father, King Austin, and her only brother, Prince Sean, the sole heir to the throne, suddenly passed away because of a strange sickness that befell them, leaving Princess Zoe, the king's only daughter, and the queen, Amber, his wife, alive. Now, after the tragedy that befell Zoe's family, the throne became empty because both the heir and the king had passed away. But it couldn't remain vacant for long, as dictated by the village tradition. And because the traditions of the village also dictated that an unmarried woman couldn't ascend the throne, Zoe, the only surviving child of the king, couldn't ascend the throne, more so as she was a cripple. Because of this, Zoe's uncle, Mark, was temporarily crowned as the new king of Elawani and was tasked to rule the land until Zoe got married. This was a big problem for Zoe because she knew she had to marry quickly in order to reclaim the throne from her uncle before his temporary reign would become permanent, and her father's legacy would be erased. Time was of essence, but she was crippled, and even while being a princess, no man wanted to take a disabled woman as their bride. As the days went by after her father's death, Zoe's goal of getting married and taking back the throne seemed less and less possible. It felt like an unachievable goal. Because despite her crippled state, Zoe and her mother Amber were the subject of the village gossip and ridicule. So young men avoided Zoe, and the villagers' whispers followed her wherever she went. The tragic loss of her father and brother had made Zoe and her mother objects of mockery and suspicion. Some of the villagers gossiped because they had never seen a wheelchair and did not understand how a chair could have wheels. Others believed that the late King Austin and his son were killed by Zoe's mother, the queen. They also believed that Zoe was crippled because her mother, the queen, used her legs to perform dark rituals. But Zoe was determined to find a solution through marriage, hoping it would end the villagers' whispers, exonerate her mother from the wicked accusations, and restore Zoe as the rightful heir to her father's throne. She was passionate about the village and its affairs, but most of the villagers only cared about her disability. "When I get married, all these will end," Zoe would say to herself each time the villagers mocked her. Then she would wheel past them back to the palace. Zoe's mother, Queen Amber, withdrew into her shell after the death of the king and his heir. So Zoe was left alone to deal with loneliness and insults from the villagers. One faithful day, Zoe decided to go to the market. She had heard from the village gossips that the village merchant acquired new sets of jewelry from the city, and they were beautiful to behold. Zoe remembered that she used to go to the market with her father to buy customized perfume and jewelry for her mother, Queen Amber. And every time her mother received these gifts, she swooned and blushed uncontrollably. But since her father's death, no one had gifted her. Zoe contemplated sending the maid to the market, but she feared the maid would buy something that wouldn't meet the queen's approval, since she did not know the queen's preferences. So she decided to visit the market herself. As Zoe wheeled past the villagers, only a few of the villagers stopped to greet her. She was sad by how the villagers ignored her, and she remembered that when her father was alive, the villagers always stopped to greet him and would genuflect with screams of His Majesty echoing through the market, after which her father would ask them to go about their business. But now, nobody cared if she was a princess or not. All the respect they used to give her had suddenly vanished. Most of the villagers ignored her, and she saw that some even pointed hands at her and whispered amongst themselves. But she did not care about any of that. At the jewelry store, the merchant greeted Zoe warmly and offered her the best of his new sets of jewelry. One of the sets caught Zoe's eyes, so she paid for it, and happily she left the store. But as she wheeled through the village, she passed a group of maidens. Then she heard one of them shout, "Look at her, princess without legs. You are just an ugly creature who should never have been born." As Zoe heard these words, she stopped her chair abruptly, and the urge to cry immediately overwhelmed her. She had heard people call her worthless, but nobody had ever said that they wished she was never born. And this hurt her even more than she thought it would. The words cut deep, and the comments grew louder and more hurtful. "You witch! Your birth killed your father and brother. If you were not born, they wouldn't have died. You are evil." Zoe couldn't bear these words, and she started to cry. Her father and brother were the only men who had accepted her wholeheartedly, despite her condition, and they loved her flawlessly. So why? Why would she kill them? Zoe did not want to cry in front of the maidens to avoid giving them another topic to gossip about, but their words were too cruel for her to bear. Suddenly, a young man stepped into view, and he looked angry. "Enough of this," the man said in an authoritative voice. "How dare you speak like that to someone who has done no wrong to you?" The maidens were surprised, yet irritated, by the man who had stepped up in favor of Princess Zoe. One of them replied harshly in a loud voice, "Who do you think you are to tell us what to do?" But the young man was resolute and retorted, "I am someone who believes in decency and respect, and I won't stand by while you belittle someone who is already suffering. Have you no respect for the late king? Have you no conscience?" the man asked in a loud voice. The maidens felt defeated and glared at the young man, but said nothing more. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, and instead of apologizing to Zoe, they rolled their eyes at the young man and left. After they left, the man turned to Zoe and kneeled beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked. But Zoe said nothing. "I am sorry they treated you that way," the man said. Zoe, still trembling from the encounter, looked up at him with teary eyes. "Thank you. I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me," Zoe said as she surveyed the young man who had helped her. She saw that he had a hat on his head. It was a straw hat with a wide brim and high crown. There was a bag slung on his shoulder, and he had a machete by his side. She could see the contents of the bag, and it contained grains and seeds, so she knew he was a farmer. The man smiled as he saw that Zoe was surveying him. "Ha ha, I see that you were wondering who it is that helped you. My name is Hudson," the man said. "I am Zoe, Princess Zoe. I appreciate your kindness," Zoe replied with a forced smile. "Princess Zoe, I know you. You are the crippled princess everyone talks about. If you need time to yourself, I know a place where we can go. It is not far from the market, and it is free from the eyes of the villagers. If you want, we can go there," Hudson suggested. Zoe nodded in consent, even though she was skeptical about following the stranger. So Hudson pushed her chair all the way to a vast area of farmland. When they got to the farmland, he wheeled her under a big tree that formed a shade. "This is your farm, isn't it?" Zoe asked. Hudson smiled in agreement. "Thank you for bringing me here, Hudson," Zoe said, her voice filled with emotion from earlier. Hudson responded, "I'm sorry you had to deal with those maidens. They can be quite thoughtless sometimes. Thank you for stepping in. I was feeling quite overwhelmed." Hudson's expression was thoughtful. "I could tell you were overwhelmed. It's never easy facing such hostility, but you handled it with a lot of grace," he said. Zoe shook her head and tried to suppress her growing frustration as her mind replayed images of the encounter with the maiden. It is difficult to stay graceful when people are so unkind. I have no friends, and the only people that were unconditionally kind to me, I have lost to the hands of death. Now I am struggling with many issues, the gossips, my condition, everything," Zoe said, but immediately stopped talking as she did not want to portray herself as a weak princess in front of Hudson. However, Hudson looked at her with understanding and suddenly smiled. "Why are you smiling? Are you mocking me, or did I say something foolish?" Zoe asked. But Hudson's next words surprised her. "You are beautiful, Princess Zoe. Your beauty cannot disappear because you are crippled. Those maidens know it too, and they are jealous. That is why they taunt you. I can be your friend. I will never judge your condition," Hudson said with a broad smile. His words stunned Zoe, and she stared breathlessly as she looked at Hudson, and no word came out of her lips. Hudson said nothing and only watched her. Then he saw her face gradually break into a smile. The smile got bigger until Zoe eventually started laughing. She laughed so hard that a tear rolled down her cheek. "Princess Zoe, is there a problem?" Troubled Hudson asked with embarrassment, as he felt that the princess was rejecting his request of becoming friends with her. Zoe saw the look on his face, and her laughter gradually died down. "No one has ever told me I am beautiful. Only my father and the crown prince did that. They are the only ones who loved me despite all odds. I am just shocked that a stranger who I just met stepped up and protected me from the harsh words of some maidens. Now he says I'm beautiful and even wants to be friends with me. Meanwhile, every other villager has avoided me like I am some kind of debilitating plague. Yes, I am surprised," Zoe said. As she said these words, Hudson nodded in acknowledgement. "Okay, I understand that it is unbelievable, considering the kind of life you lived in the past, and that is all right. But you truly are beautiful. Stay here. I wish to plant the grains in the farm. It wouldn't take too long. I already planted some earlier, but ran out of grains, which is why I was at the market," Hudson said as he left. Zoe watched as he dug the soil with his machete and planted grain in it. The sun was scorching, but he had his hat on him. She watched for a while, forgetting that Hudson had asked to be her friend. It seemed like Hudson had forgotten about her because he planted like no one was watching him. But then he flashed Zoe a smile, and it made her remember that the young man had asked to be her friend. And this brought smiles to her face. It was the first time she was smiling genuinely since the death of her father and brother. When Hudson finished planting, he went to Zoe under the shade. "Have you decided now?" Hudson asked as he sat down on the grass without care. Then he pulled off the farmer's hat and poured water on his face to cool himself, after which he washed his hands. Zoe liked how free he was, and it made her smile again. "Yes, I want us to be friends," Zoe responded to his question. "Does my new friend care for a little something to eat?" Hudson asked with a smile. Zoe was about to ask him what it was that he wanted her to eat. Then she saw him carefully open a basket that contained fresh fruits and nuts, so she replied, "Yes, thank you." She was skeptical about eating at first. For some reason, she feared that the fruits were poisoned. But she grew comfortable after she saw him munch the nuts and fruits. As they ate, they talked until they lost track of time. Hudson talked about how much he had heard about her from the villagers. He said he missed King Austin, and he said he was sorry Zoe lost her father. Zoe thanked him when he said this. "Thank you so much, Hudson. You are a kind man," she said. Then they went on with their discussion. Hudson's father was late, and his mother was not a native of Elawani. His father married his mother from the neighboring village. But after his death, she fell sick and was unable to deal with the loss. So she went back to her people to be treated and remained there. But Hudson visited her on occasions. This made Zoe know that he truly understood the pain she was feeling from losing two people she loved. And she was grateful for the time he spent with her. Hudson was a funny guy, and his jokes made Zoe laugh. He was the first man who truly appreciated her real self and did not care about her condition. It had been a long time since Zoe had that much fun. And the more they talked, the more she learned about him and grew a liking for him. Dong, dong, dong. The village clock rang. The clock had been ringing at intervals, but Zoe and Hudson were too absorbed in their conversation to notice that time was slipping away. It was at that time that Hudson noticed that the shadows were now darker and longer, and birds were beginning to sing. That was when they realized that it was evening already, and Zoe was not within the walls of the palace. "Oh no, my mother would be worried," Zoe cried out. "Then you better hurry home. I'll help," Hudson said kindly. Then he hurriedly packed the remaining grains inside his basket. "Let us meet again tomorrow, Princess Zoe. Same time here at the farm. Does this please you?" Hudson asked as he stood up. Zoe answered, yes, without processing the question. She was not herself at that moment, as she thought over and over about how worried her mother would be. Then she offered to hold Hudson's machete and the basket as he pushed the wheelchair all the way to the palace. Hudson left Zoe in front of the palace gate. "Thank you," Zoe said hastily to Hudson as he collected his machete and basket from her hands. "Tomorrow we meet again," Hudson replied. Then he fled before the palace guards caught wind of him. Zoe saw a group of guards with lamps approach her. "Who goes there?" The chief guard called out as he saw a figure in front of him. "It is I, Princess Zoe," Zoe immediately answered. "Princess, we are sorry. We did not recognize you." The chief guard apologized with a bow when he saw that the figure was truly Princess Zoe. You disappeared without the knowledge of anyone. The entire palace has been searching for you, and the queen is deeply bothered. The words confirmed Zoe's fears. When Zoe entered the palace, she first went to the queen's chambers. There she saw her mother, Queen Amber, seated on a stool, gazing out into the village. Zoe felt bad as she saw her mother in the state. She was aware her mother was yet to deal with the grief of losing her husband and son, and it made her sad that she was adding to her mother's problems. Queen Amber was lost in thoughts and did not realize Zoe's presence. So Zoe wheeled her chair to her mother's side and gently placed a hand on her mother's arm. "Mother, Mother," she said, as she shook her arm to bring her out of her thoughts. "Yes," Queen Amber replied, as she almost jumped out of her seat in fright. But Zoe held her strongly, and when Queen Amber saw that it was her daughter whom she frantically searched for in the last few hours, she sighed in relief and sat down. "I thought I lost you too," Queen Amber said sadly, with her eyes fixed to the ground. "No, Mother, I am okay. I'm sorry I got you worried," Zoe apologized. "Tell me what happened," Queen Amber asked. Zoe stammered, as she did not know where to start her story from. She also did not want to remember all the pain she felt because of the incident. "The truth, Zoe. Tell me the truth," Queen Amber commanded. "I went to the market. All I wanted was to get you jewelry, then return to the palace." "So what happened?" Queen Amber questioned. "Nothing. It's just the usual insults and derogatory statements." "The jewelry is beautiful," Zoe said with a smile, trying to brush off the conversation. But Queen Amber was adamant and started to get emotional. "So the usual insults kept you out of the palace till nightfall? Zoe, you have gotten used to being abused that you now think it's usual. I am tired, Zoe. The weight of everything that has happened is crushing me, and I do not know if I can handle the pain any longer." When Zoe looked at her mother, she saw that her eyes were filled with tears. "Zoe, do you know how scared I was when I found out you were not in the palace? I alerted your uncle and the guards. I feared that the villagers harmed you. I hear what they say about you and about me. I hear the accusations, and it hurts me. They blame me for everything, and they look at you, my beautiful daughter, and all they see is your disability. When your father was alive, they treated us with love and respect, but his death has made them forget the happy moments we shared as a community." It broke Zoe's heart to see her mother cry, so she squeezed her mother's hand and tried to console her. "They are just cruel words, Mommy. They do not know the truth, and they don't understand our pain. Please don't cry," Zoe told her mother as she wiped her tears with her hands. "Mommy, I made a friend today, and I plan to meet him again tomorrow. He saved me from the cruel words of the maidens, and he is the one I spent time with. We talked till I lost track of time." As Queen Amber heard these words, she suddenly stopped crying, and her eyes lit up in surprise. "A man, you say? Tell me, who is this man?" the Queen asked. "His name is Hudson. His father is late, and his mother lives in the neighboring village. He is a great farmer of the land," Zoe answered. Farmer? I'm glad you made a friend. You have my permission to see him tomorrow. But don't get me worried by staying out for too long. Go with a guard and be careful with this new friend of yours. You just met him," Queen Amber told Zoe. Zoe's face lit up with joy as she heard this. "Thank you, Mommy. Thank you." "I'll go with a guard. You have no reason to worry, Mommy," she said excitedly. "Now go meet your uncle. He needs to know you are back," the Queen said. Later that day, Zoe went to see her uncle. She saw that her uncle was in a council meeting with the elders of the village, so she stood by the door until the meeting was concluded. As the elders passed her, she greeted them, but only a few acknowledged her greetings. The rest acted like she was invisible. When Zoe entered the throne room, her uncle, King Mark, was seated on the throne. The room was dimly lit, and the air was heavy with unspoken words. Then she bowed in a graceful arc. "Your Majesty," she said in a firm and respectful voice. "Princess Zoe," King Mark called out. "It's a good thing you decided to return from whatever escapade you ventured in. Your mother was worried," he said. Zoe had thought her uncle would ask if she was okay or try to find out what delayed her, but he didn't, and she was not surprised. She already knew her uncle was not a kind man, and he only acted like he cared to ease her mother's worries. "Sorry, I came back late, Uncle. I was with a friend." I did not know you have friends. I am not trying to make you feel bad, but I did not think someone would actually want to be friends with a..." The king said amidst chuckles, "Good luck with your friends. But next time you go on such escapades, do make sure you return early. Leaving the palace gates open endangers my life and compromises my safety," the king said harshly. Zoe was not new to her uncle's unkindness. She knew he hated her, so she replied, "Okay," to avoid stretching the matter, after which King Mark dismissed her. As she left the throne room, she felt bitter towards her uncle, but those feelings were quickly replaced by thoughts of Hudson, which made her smile. Then she prayed for the next day to arrive quickly so she would see Hudson. After Zoe left the throne room, the king thought about her, and he grew curious about the supposed friend Zoe had. He knew how cruel the villagers were to Zoe, so he was very much surprised when Zoe told him she was with a friend. So, King Mark summoned his most trusted palace guard. "Your Highness," the guard greeted, "I have a discreet task for you. I want you to keep watch on Princess Zoe and report her movements and activities to me directly. This is a matter of utmost confidentiality and importance. See to it that it is done without drawing attention to yourself," the king instructed. Later, the next day, Zoe went to the farm to see Hudson. She was delighted to meet him, and he smiled broadly when she called him by his name. "Princess Zoe, I am glad you came around," Hudson replied. "Are we not friends? Why do you address me as Princess? Is this your way of setting boundaries?" Zoe asked. "Boundaries? Of course not. I just thought you liked being addressed that way. I know the late King Austin treated the villagers with love. We are peasants in the eyes of the royal family." No. The royal family is not like that. If I thought of you that way, I wouldn't spend time chatting with you. So do not say that about yourself. In case you've forgotten, it is because of you guys that the whole village has food to eat. Please call me Zoe, the same way I call you by your name," Zoe answered. Zoe spent the rest of the day gisting and laughing with Hudson. They talked about many things. Hudson told her stories of the things he faced on the farm. He talked about his mother, and he talked about her village. When it was nighttime, just before the village clock rang, Zoe dismissed him. Then she went home. Later that night, King Mark summoned her again. "I guess you had another adventure today, Princess Zoe. You should limit the way you move around the village. Your presence bothers the villagers, and I do not want them to hurt you," the king said. Zoe laughed inwardly. She did not know why the king was suddenly interested in knowing about her affairs, but she knew he was not worried about her. He just did not want her to go about the village parading her crippled state. "Your Highness, I left the palace with a guard, so no one would have harmed me," Zoe replied. Then King Mark sent for his trusted guard. "I need a report from today," the king asked. "My king, today, Princess Zoe met with a farmer?" "Uncle, you have been monitoring me?" Zoe immediately interrupted the guard. "Yes. Do I not have the right to be bothered about my niece?" King Mark replied. "So this friend of yours is a farmer. Is this the caliber of people you make friends with? I hope you do not plan to marry a lowly peasant." "No, absolutely not. You can't do that. My brother would never approve of it." The mention of her father ignited a flicker of anger in Zoe's eyes. "You don't know anything about my father, Uncle. You two were never close. And believe me, he would never demean his people by calling them peasants," Zoe said with a dry, amused laugh. "I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself. Besides, I never said I intend to marry the farmer. So please, let's not trouble ourselves with such assumptions," she added tactfully, trying not to provoke him further. The last thing she needed was for her freedom to be curtailed. "Very well, I'll take your word for it," King Mark said before dismissing the guard. Zoe then took a deep breath and shifted the conversation to a matter close to her heart. "Uncle, the farmers are suffering. The drought is severe, and without help, their crops won't survive." "Let me guess," the king said with mocking amusement. "Your new friend filled your head with this?" "No, I heard the murmurs at the market, and yes, Hudson mentioned it too. They've suggested we divert river water using trenches and channels. It's a simple method they've used before, but it requires organization and support." King Mark brushed the idea aside with a wave of his hand. "The farmers will manage, as they always have. I won't be redirecting essential resources for the sake of their complaints. I've already arranged to import grain from neighboring villages. No need for extravagant spending." "But Uncle, grain is a temporary fix. What they need is sustainability. They've resorted to carrying barrels of water across long distances. If we invest in a proper irrigation system now, it would ease their burden and improve the village for generations," Zoe urged. The king's eyes darkened. "You speak like a ruler, but you're a child playing dress-up in court. Governance isn't for the naive. Leave these decisions to those who understand their weight." Zoe drew in a calming breath, steadying her voice. "Perhaps I am young, but I see the pain of our people. I'm not here to take your place. I'm only trying to help. If we truly care for this kingdom, we must work together." But her words only fueled King Mark's frustration. "You are not in charge. he snapped, his expression tightening. Help? You are nothing but a hindrance, Zoe. Your presence here reminds us all of your father's weak leadership. The sooner you accept that truth, the better. Zoe didn't flinch. She held her ground, her voice firm. I will not stop standing for what is right. Not for you, not for anyone. I do this for our people and the land my father loved. Mark looked her over, then let out a cruel laugh. You? Fight for this kingdom? Take a look at yourself, Zoe. Bound to that chair, you are a burden. That's all you are. Now leave me. I have more pressing matters to attend to. He turned his back on her with a dismissive gesture. The sting of his words settled deep in Zoe's chest. She bit her lip to stop the tears, but when she reached her room, she wept quietly, mourning her father's absence more than ever. The following morning, Zoe ventured into the village to clear her mind. She didn't visit Hudson because he had gone to see his mother, whom he hadn't visited in quite a while. Instead, Zoe took 2 guards along for the journey. As she moved through the village in her wheelchair, the usual gossip swirled around her, but no one dared confront her directly with palace guards in tow. Then, something unexpected caught her attention. A procession of luxurious black cars winding through the dusty village paths. Villagers watched in awe, murmuring as the convoy passed. The last time they had seen such vehicles was during the coronation of late King Austin, whose university friends had come to honor him. King Austin had been the first man from Elawani to graduate from a university. So when Zoe became wheelchair-bound, the elders took it in stride. Zoe and her rolling house, they sometimes joked. The children, however, were fascinated by the new arrivals and chased the convoy through the streets, while the elders watched with quiet suspicion. Zoe, intrigued, followed from a distance. The convoy stopped at the village square. From the sleekest of the cars stepped a tall, elegant man in a tailored suit. An old man gasped and rushed forward. "Charlie," he exclaimed. The man bowed slightly as the elder clapped him on the back. Charlie Spears, son of the late Mr. Spears, had returned. His resemblance to his father was striking. After his father's death, Charlie's mother had fled with him while he was still a child. No one had seen him since. Zoe watched as Charlie took in the village with a shrewd gaze, his expression unreadable. He had plans, big ones. The villagers gathered slowly. The chief stepped forward with a cautious smile. "Welcome back to Elawani, Mr. Spears," he said, extending his hand. Charlie took it, his grip confident. "Thank you, Chief. I've returned not just to visit, but to contribute. I have a project in mind, one I believe could save lives." The villagers leaned in as Charlie continued. "I want to build a hospital here. It will reduce preventable deaths, restore vision to the blind, and even correct physical disabilities." The crowd gasped, some shouting in joy. "Our princess is crippled," someone called out, and several people chuckled. An old woman spat on the ground. A palace guard moved closer to Zoe. "Princess, perhaps we should head back," he said gently. Zoe nodded. One of the guards turned her chair away from the crowd. "So we have a cripple among us?" Charlie said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well then, my hospital will fix her legs." The villagers were too busy celebrating to notice the tone in his voice. The chief clapped his hands. "Come with us to the palace." the king should hear your proposal himself." Charlie nodded, self-assured. Of course. He entered one of the vehicles with the elders and headed to the palace. The rest of the village erupted into discussion, speculating about the hospital. Meanwhile, Zoe was lost in thought. Something about Charlie unsettled her, but hope bloomed in her chest. Could there finally be a solution? Could her condition be reversed? She was so absorbed, she didn't notice when they reached the palace gates. Charlie's meeting, however, didn't go as he had envisioned. King Mark was cold, dismissive. He rejected the hospital plan outright. Instead, he suggested Charlie use his resources to renovate the village school and fund scholarships for higher education. Disappointed, Charlie watched as the elders promised to revisit the idea and persuade the king. As he drove out of the palace gates, Charlie's eyes met Zoe's. He noticed the wheelchair, the strength in her gaze despite the limpness in her limbs, and he smiled. At last, I've seen her. She's the one. For the ritual, he murmured to himself. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Have a beautiful day.